Question 79.23. Questioner: it was probably the design of the logos to allow the conscious mind greater freedom under the first distortion by partitioning, you might say, this from the potentiator or unconscious, which had a greater communication with the total mind, therefore allowing for the birth of uneducated, to use a poor term, portions of consciousness. Is this correct? Answer: I am Ra. This is roughly correct. Question 79.24. Questioner: could you roughen it or elucidate a bit on that? Answer: I am Ra. There is intervening material before we may do so. Question 79.25. Questioner: okay, was then this simple experiment carried out and the product of this experiment observed before greater complexity was attempted? Answer: I am Ra. As we have said, there have been a great number of successive experiments. Question 79.26. Questioner: I was just wondering, since this seems to be the crux of the experiment, the large breaking point between no extension of the first distortion and the extension of the first distortion, what the result of this original experiment was with respect to that which was created from it. What was the result of that? Answer: I am Ra. This is previously covered material. The result of these experiments has been a more vivid, varied, and intense experience of creator by creator. Question 79.27. Questioner: well, I was aware of that. I probably didn't state the question correctly. It's a very difficult question to state. I don't know if it's worth attempting to continue with, but what I meant was, when this very first experiment with the veiling process occurred, did it result in service to self-polarization with the first experiment? Answer: I am Ra. The early, if we may use this term, logos produced service to self and service to others' mind, body, spirit complexes immediately. The harvestability of these entities was not so immediate, and thus refinements of the archetypes began apace. Question 79.28. Questioner: now we are getting to what I was trying to determine. Then at this point were there still only 9 archetypes, and the veil had just been drawn between the matrix and the potentiator of the mind? Answer: I am Ra. There were 9 archetypes and many shadows. Question 79.29. Questioner: by shadows do you mean what I might refer to as, birthing of small archetypical biases? Answer: I am Ra. Rather, we would describe these shadows as the inchoate thoughts of helpful structures not yet fully conceived. Question 79.30. Questioner: would the choice exist at this point during the creation of the first service to self-polarity? Answer: I am Ra. Implicit in the veiling or separation of 2 archetypes is the concept of choice. The refinement to this concept took many experiences. Question 79.31. Questioner: I'm sorry that I have so much difficulty in asking these questions, but this is material that I find somewhat difficult. I find it interesting that the very first experiment of veiling the matrix of the mind from the potentiator of the mind and vice versa created service to self-polarity. This seems to be a very important philosophical point in the development of the creation, and possibly the beginning of a system of what we would call magic not envisioned previously. Let me ask this question. Prior to the extension of the first distortion, was the magical potential of the higher densities as great as it is now when the greatest potential was achieved in consciousness for each density? This is difficult to ask. What I am asking is that at the end of 4th density, prior to the extension of free will, was what we call magical potential as great as it is now at the end of 4th density? Answer: I am Ra. As you understand, if we may use this misnomer, magic, the magical potential in 3rd and 4th density was then far greater than after the change. However, there was far less desire or will to use this potential. Question 79.32. Questioner: now, to be sure that I understand you, prior to the change and the extension of free will, let's take specifically the end of 4th density, magical potential for the condition when there was only service to others. Polarization was much greater at the end of 4th density than at the end of 4th density immediately after the split of polarization and the extension of free will. Is that correct? Answer: I am Ra. Magical ability is the ability to consciously use the so-called unconscious. Therefore, there was maximal ability prior to the innovation of sublogos free will. Question 79.33. Questioner: Okay, at the present time we are experiencing the effects of a more complex or greater number of archetypes, and I have guessed that the ones we are experiencing now in the mind are as follows. We have the magician and high priestess, which correspond to the matrix and potentiator with the veil drawn between them, which is the primary creator of the extension of the first distortion. Is that correct? Answer: I am Ra. We are unable to answer this query without intervening material. Question 79.34. Questioner: Okay, sorry about that. The next archetype, the Empress, is the catalyst of the mind, that which acts upon the conscious mind to change it. The fourth archetype is the Emperor, the experience of the mind, which is that material stored in the unconscious which creates its continuing bias. Am I correct with those statements? Answer: I am Ra. Though far too rigid in your statements, you perceive correct relationships. There is a great deal of dynamic interrelationship in these first four archetypes. Question 79.35. Questioner: Would the Hierophants then be somewhat of a governor or sorter of these effects so as to create the proper assimilation by the unconscious of that which comes through the conscious? Answer: I am Ra. Although thoughtful, the supposition is incorrect in its heart. Question 79.36. Questioner: What would be the Hierophants? Answer: I am Ra. The Hierophants is the significator of the body asterisk complex, its very nature. We may note that the characteristics of which you speak do have bearing upon the significator of the mind complex, but are not the heart. The heart of the mind complex is that dynamic entity which absorbs, seeks, and attempts to learn. Ra corrected this error in session number 80. The Hierophants is the significator of the mind. Question 79.37. Questioner: Then is the Hierophants that link, you might say, between the mind and the body? Answer: I am Ra. There is a strong relationship between the significators of the mind, the body, and the spirit. Your statement is too broad. Question 79.38. Questioner: Let me skip over the Hierophants for a minute because I am really not understanding that at all, and just asked if the lovers represent a merging of the conscious and the unconscious, or the communication of the conscious and unconscious. Answer: I am Ra. Again, without being at all unperceptive, you miss the heart of this particular archetype, which may be more properly called the transformation of the mind. Question 79.39. Questioner: Transformation of the mind into what? Answer: I am Ra. As you observe archetype 6, you may see the student of the mysteries being transformed by the need to choose betwixt the light and the dark in mind. Question 79.40. Questioner: Would the conqueror or chariot then represent the culmination of the action of the first 6 archetypes into a conquering of the mental processes, even possibly removing the veil? Answer: I am Ra. This is most perceptive. The archetype 7 is one difficult to enunciate. We may call it the path, the way, or the great way of the mind. Its foundation is a reflection and substantial summary of archetypes 1 through 6. One may also see the way of the mind as showing the kingdom or fruits of appropriate travel through the mind, in that the mind continues to move as majestically through the material it conceives of as a chariot drawn by royal lions or steeds. At this time we would suggest one more full query, for this instrument is experiencing some distortions towards pain. Question 79.41. Questioner: Then I will just ask about the one of the archetypes which I am the least able to understand at this point, if I can use that word at all. I am still very much in the dark, so to speak, in respect to the Hierophant and precisely what it is. Could you give me some other indication of what that is? Answer: I am Ra. You have been most interested in the significator, which must needs become complex. The Hierophants is the original archetype of mind, which has been made complex through the subtle movements of the conscious and unconscious. The complexities of mind were evolved rather than the simple molding of experience from potentiator to matrix. The mind itself became an actor possessed of free will and, more especially, will. As the significator of the mind, the Hierophant is the will to know, but what shall it do with its knowledge, and for what reasons does it seek? The potentials of a complex significator are manifold. Are there any brief queries at this working? Question 79.42. Questioner, only is there anything that we can do to make the instrument more comfortable or to improve the contact? Answer, I am Ra. All is well. For some small portion of your future the instrument would be well advised to wear upon the hands those aids to comfort which it has neglected to use. There has been some trauma to both hands and arms and, therefore, we have had to somewhat abbreviate this working. I am Ra. You are conscientious, my friends. We leave you in the love and in the light of the one infinite Creator. Go forth, therefore, rejoicing in the power and the peace of the one glorious infinite Creator. Adonai.